Hello, in this video I will show you how to define variables in the IBM SPSS statistics software. Here I have a very short data set just to use as an example. Usually data sets are much larger. This data set includes 5 individuals or 5 students, and for each student I have a numeric ID, their name, age, gender, grade level, their scores on math, English, and science, and the number of the number of hours that each student is studying per week. Notice that each individual represents a line in our table, and then in the columns we have different measures, and these measures take different values from one individual to another. That's why these measures are called variables. Now notice that before I can use these data for statistical analysis, I need to make some changes. For instance, I may not want to have decimal points for ID or for age. Or I may need to code gender using numeric values rather than words. This will allow me to include the gender variable in some statistical analysis. So instead of female, I'm going to use, for instance, the value 1, and instead of male, I'm going to use the value 2. So I'm going to replace words with numbers here. Again, gender is a categorical variable. So even though I am using numbers, this is just a coding procedure, right? It doesn't mean that the two categories have an inherent order. This is just for computation purposes. Now, if I go to the variable view tab, I can add more information about each variable. Notice that each row represents one of the variables, right? I have ID, name, age, gender, and so on. For each variable, I have to specify the type. And this is very important because it would allow me to run different types of analysis depending on the type of variable, right? For ID is a numeric variable, so the type will be numeric. We use numeric values. I can specify the width, meaning how many characters I want to use. For ID, 8 is a reasonable number, but I don't need any decimals for ID, right? This is an integer, so I don't need to use decimals. And I can assign a more explicit label, for instance, identification number. And right now, the measure was automatically set to nominal, but again, we're using numeric values, so we can set it to scale, meaning a quantitative variable. For the name is identified as a type string because we use characters to type in names, right? The width is set to 7. Of course, if it's a long name, 7 may be insufficient. So if we want, we can increase the number of characters assigned for the name. And of course, the measure would be nominal because names are nominal variables. Age are of numeric type. The width could probably be reduced to 3, right? And then the decimal points to 0, because in this data we don't have any decimals for the age. And the type of measure is scale because it's a quantitative variable. The gender variable was designated automatically as string because we had words to designate female versus male, right? But now we use numeric values, so we have to change string to numeric. To do that, I clicked on the button on the right side, and from this window I can change the variable type to numeric. Notice all the other options that are available here, like date, dollar, currency, and so on that you can choose from with other variable types. And then click OK. And again, I have to change the variable measure here. Now I'm using numeric values. Of course, gender is a nominal variable, but if I want to use it for computations or for different types of analysis, I have to designate it as an ordinal variable. So again, keep in mind though, when you're interpreting the results from those analyses, that even though we're using numeric values to designate different gender identifications, those numbers are just code. They don't represent an inherent order of the different categories. Now for grade level, again we use numeric values. This can be set to scale as it is. And then math, English, and science scores are all numeric. We can use 2 decimals, and they are set to a scale score, which is a good score for a quantitative variable. The number of study hours also can be edited. For instance, we may want to add a label to specify that this represents the number of hours that students are studying per week. So maybe I can add here study hours per week. Labels are very helpful because variable names by themselves are quite short, and also they don't allow any spaces, so sometimes they're not very clear or explicit. So when using the label, it's a lot more clear what the variable refers to. Another very useful feature, especially for ordinal variables like gender, for instance, is specifying what the numeric values actually mean. Remember, we changed the words to numeric values, so we have to specify those codes here, especially if there are other individuals who are using the data, not just us, or if some time goes by and we forget how we coded those values. So using this feature, I can specify here by clicking on the plus button that the value 1 actually means female, and add another value, which is 2, for male. And you can do the same and keep adding other numeric values for other different types of gender identification, and then click OK. So now my data are defined, the variables are defined, and they're ready for analysis. And for instance, if we use these variables for statistical analysis, you will notice that the labels are used instead of the variable names. For instance, if I want to look at the gender variable, I can go to the Analyze menu, Descriptive Statistics, and Frequencies, and then I say I'm selecting gender. Move it to the variable area, and then click OK. And notice that I get the number of individuals in each of the 2 categories, but the categories are not designated as number 1 or number 2 as they're coded in the data, but they actually are designated using the codes or the labels that I specified for those values, which are female and male. And this is how to code variables and how to define variable types in SPSS.